Dr. Hill, use Outlook. Dr. Hill. Dr. Hill, you could create a rule. So I will here, yes, and then when you go over here, you could create a rule. Good afternoon, everyone. Now it's just going in there. We are here for the Student Achievement Committee meeting. We get to do the top work of the district. So exciting. Today we are going to be discussing promotion and retention and the 2026 Summer Learning Update. But before we jump in, I will entertain a motion to approve our minutes from February 24th, 2026.
I move to approve our minutes from February 2026.
Second. So our minutes have been approved, and I will turn it over to Dr. Hill.
I want to say good afternoon to all of you, and thank you so much for this opportunity. Please know this time of the year we have one foot in 25-26 and the other foot in 26-27. So we wanted to bring to you two topics that for our Student Achievement Committee meeting today. And the first one will be supporting our student success. And this is an annual promotion and retention update. Before I even begin, I would like to report that we have been in constant communication with the Department of Public Instruction about an annual report that comes to us with our retention numbers, promotion and retention numbers. Due to the transition of us moving from Infinite Campus from Power School, there has been a significant delay in that report. And so please know that when we do receive that report, we will come back to you all with that update. But I wanted to be transparent even before we begin today. This afternoon, we want to look at what are those applicable state and local board policies related to the issue of promotion and retention practices. Look at where we were with our district data up to this point, with relations to student promotion and retention trends, and how we're looking at strategically to plan and support those equitable student outcomes. Look at the guidelines that we have as a district and the criteria for promotion and retention, ensuring that that is consistent and supported decision-making amongst all of our schools. And then finally, look at those instructional supports, academic interventions, and our core instruction efforts that prepare students for success. And we have our team here today, Dr. Brian Johnson, Ms. Siobhan Stone, Dr. Brad McMillan from Data Research and Accountability, and our newest addition, Dr. Lam Jowers, our Assistant Sup for Instructional Services. Dr. Harris, Chin, Dr. Raymond. When we look at our strategic plan alignment with both Priority 1 and Priority 2, this is an alignment of how we're making sure that through the lens of our students, it is crucial to align the work with our district strategic plan. And it centers on these two key priorities, which you all are very familiar with as we move this effort forward. When we also look at those metrics for Priority 1 and Priority 2, these metrics do in fact guide our efforts and measure the impact of our academic advancement priorities, student knowledge and skills, as well as student dispositions and well-being. So this is our dashboard of what we're monitoring to see what efforts we're doing regarding our students and their progress. In alignment with Board Policy 3420, student promotion and accountability, outlined in that policy, Section G1, we have reporting requirements that we have to submit. The first one being the number and the percentage of our students that are retained and are not meeting their standards for grade level. Also, for our third grade students that are exempt from mandatory third grade retention by category of exemption as listed in state law. And then finally, the remedial or additional educational opportunities that we as a school system provide for our students and the success of those efforts in helping them to meet those grade level promotion standards. I'm now going to yield to Dr. McMillan, and he's going to take us through this data in which we're still awaiting the report from the state.
Thank you. So I'm going to go ahead and tackle the first two of those bullets on that last slide, and then I'll hand it over to my colleagues here to talk about what happens with respect to the third one. As mentioned by Dr. Hill, we don't have data from last year yet about how many of our students were retained. You can see the chart here is labeled non-promotion rates. That's the term the state uses, non-promotion, retention, same thing, just two different ways of saying it, but that's their terminology that they use. And the red line here is the state's non-promotion rate over the last decade or so, which you can see has been mostly between about 2.5 and 3, just depending on what year it is. And then the blue line that kind of tracks parallel right underneath it is the same rate for students here in Wake County. It's a couple of interesting things you'll notice there. Prior to the pandemic, that rate had been coming down pretty steadily, both for us and for the state for a number of years until the pandemic hit. And then you see a little drop, and then you see the big spike, and then you see it come back down again. So that little drop, just as a reminder, was the spring of 2020 when schools had gone into remote learning, when the pandemic was in its earliest days. Instruction was challenging, to say the least, and I think there was a lot of grace given to students as far as their ability to complete coursework that year, particularly at the high school level, which is probably why we saw a little bit of a drop there, giving kids the benefit of the doubt during an incredibly difficult time. And then the following year, where we had our year of students in remote, then in person, then back to remote, then in person, and then back in person, that really chaotic 2020-21 school year, you can see it went back up again. Again, highlighting some of the challenges with the remote learning situation, but also sort of probably the re-implementation of our pre-pandemic expectations for kids, because our high school students did finish most of that year in the building from about March onward. So you saw a little bit of a spike there for us in the state. And then since then, it's been settling down sort of toward that historical average. I wouldn't anticipate it would be dramatically different had we been able to get the 25 data from the state at this point, but we will share that with you, as Dr. Hill mentioned, as soon as it's available to us. This next slide just takes those same overall numbers for Wake County and breaks them down by grade level, just so you can see where students are more likely to be not promoted. And you can see there's a little bit of activity down there in the early elementary grades, particularly in kindergarten, historically speaking. But the bulk of the non-promotion occurs at the high school level. And there's a handful of reasons for that. At the kindergarten level, sometimes we run into readiness issues with kids that lead us to believe maybe a student with a late birth date that kind of runs close to that cutoff might benefit from an extra year in kindergarten. But then you see very little of it up through K through 8. And then at grade 9, it goes up substantially, and then tapers off until we get to grade 12. And part of that is a function of what retentions consist of at K through 8 versus 9 through 12. At K through 8, as we'll be talking about here in a minute, it's more of a holistic judgment based on a variety of factors, whereas once we get to high school, it becomes a pretty simple numbers game. You accumulate the credits or you don't. And so it's a little bit more of a quantitative, hard number situation at the high school level. And those same ups and downs we saw with the pandemic, you'll see here in the yellow bar, which was the spring of 2020, the green bar 2021, and then again settling back down to as close to our historical averages pre-pandemic. The last slide here is something we calculate internally. The state does not report this, and so these are our numbers from 2 years ago that take those retention numbers and break them down further by some selected student groups. So you can see here what the non-promotion rate looks like for American Indian, Asian, African American, Hispanic, Latino, multiracial, and white students separately. And one of the things you'll notice in this particular graph is that the patterns among these groups tend to mirror the same kinds of patterns that we see with some of the other data that we track, like graduation rates and attendance and proficiency and things like that, showing that same general pattern of ups and downs across those different student subgroups. So it's not something that gets reported by the state, but it's something that we like to take a close look at here in the district, because that's another indicator that we like to monitor and make sure that kids are making progress throughout the grades. The second bullet that comes from that policy 3420 has to do specifically with third grade promotion and retention, often referred to as Read to Achieve. And this is a state program where we monitor that status in very much more fine-grained ways for our third graders in literacy every year. And so with the spring of 24-25, so this is the most current data we have, it's end of last school year. If you start with that green slice of the pie chart there, we'll kind of start there and kind of work around clockwise. Almost 57% of our third graders last year were either proficient on the beginning of grade 3 test or the end of grade 3 test. And that is one of the ways that a student can meet the Read to Achieve standard is by scoring level 3 at least on either of those two tests. And then moving around to the light blue there, we had another 10% of our third graders last year who didn't meet the standard in that way, but they met it through an alternate assessment, typically the class assessment that we give in our district, and met that grade level standard, which got them through the gateway, if you will. And then we have a couple of groups of students who are exempt. Multilingual learners in some instances can be exempt from having to meet this gateway, as do certain students who have reading goals in their IEPs who are receiving special education services. And then the last slice of the pie there, the 25% non-proficient, is the percentage of our third graders who met none of those criteria during the school year. However, we have summer reading camps that we run every year to help give kids additional scoops of learning to get through that, to get over that hump. And so if you look at the 25% that didn't do it during the school year, we had about an additional 900 or so of them be able to meet that criteria through the summer reading camps, which left about 18% of our third graders not having met the Read to Achieve standard at the end of the year. And that then leads to things like a transitional classroom or transitional grade level designation for a student potentially when they start third grade as a 3rd/4th grader. If y'all have more questions about how that works, I'll defer to my colleagues in academics to talk a little bit about that if you have questions. But that report is something we're required to report out every year to see how well our kids are meeting that reading standard, because we know how important it is for them to be able to read proficiently at the end of third grade as far as their future success in school.
Ms. Evans, I'm sorry.
That's okay. Do you mind if we go ask now? Okay. Are these, do we know if the 18 will not, well, the students that are not proficient that complete the summer reading camps, do we track their, do we know that they're completing the reading camp and still not proficient, or does that number include students who may not participate, or?
The latter. I would also, because although we invite students to the summer reading camps, attendance is not mandatory, so that would also include students who chose not to participate in summer reading camps as well. They would end up being designated as not having met the standard.
Okay.
So do we know the percentage that's of efficacy for the summer reading camps for people who do attend?
I think that is part of the next presentation.
Thank you.
Spoiler alert.
Ms. Carter, have a question? Or that was your question?
Yeah, that was my question. I was also going to ask, when were we going to get the new information on some of those other slides for 24, 25, just to compare it?
We were hoping last week, I think, we got a message. We had heard there was a possibility last week, and so it could be any day.
Okay.
I think it's just the transition to Infinite Campus that's made that report problematic, I think, for everyone in the state, not just for us.
And then if I could just follow up.
Oh, yeah, go ahead, I'm sorry.
That's okay. Can you cover a little bit more on, let's see, it's in slide 7. I know that we generally see it a little bit higher in 9th grade when they transition, but can you go over why we see such a spike right there between 8th and 9th grade? Because it's not like a gradual, it's a pretty abrupt spike.
It is.
And what are we doing to try and ease our students a little bit more into 9th grade transition so we don't see those kind of numbers?
I'm going to start that, and I'm going to kick it to my colleagues to maybe talk in a little bit more of a nuanced way about it. But moving from 8th grade to 9th grade, there are specific criteria, specific courses students have to pass, and a specific number of credits kids have to accumulate, or they are essentially automatically retained. Whereas a lot of times in middle school, if kids are struggling maybe just in one subject area or something, you're not going to necessarily retain an 8th grader because they're having trouble in math and doing well in everything else. But failing English 1, I believe, is like basically a criteria for being retained in 9th grade. So that's a case where really one class could cause a student to be retained, whereas maybe in the elementary, middle school grades, there's a more holistic judgment there. I don't know if y'all want to speak.
We do have a slide coming up here shortly that kind of goes over the different, based off of your grade level, what those credits will need to be in order for you to be promoted. But also there is the transition from middle school to high school and just the time that you are in a course as well. So we're going from year-long based courses to many semester-based courses, and so that is an adjustment for many in that pacing as well. And so that is why we see a lot of times in the ninth grade that it does increase.
Right, and I was just wondering, because it seems to be something that happens often. So is there something that we can do more in eighth grade that would transition them better, that they wouldn't struggle either identifying, or something that makes it a little bit easier so we don't see such a struggle? Because it is an adjustment to go from 8 to 9.
And so one of the things I would say is that, they'll continue to work on making sure they're able to transition appropriately when they get to the ninth grade. But the fact that you see these high retention numbers, that still doesn't discount that those students will have opportunity to do credit recovery and other things where they can stay with their cohort as they go through high school. And so when we think about that number of retentions in the ninth grade, that doesn't necessarily equate to that particular group's graduation rate. So the high school will do things to help those students continue to transition. But it's beyond just the numbers that you see there. So both in the eighth grade transitioning, but also once they get to high school, and even if they experience failure, there's going to be credit recovery. And I think every high school may have different ways that they address transition and support.
And we'll have some of that information as well coming here later. But we do have some schools, high schools, that are working with their feeder pattern schools in order to identify students that may be at risk coming in, and they do offer some optional summer options for them to come in and get some study skills and preparation skills before they come into ninth grade, and some of them have had some success with that.
And there are additional programs such as Avid that helps with that organizational piece that we have in schools, and then some schools trying out also freshman academies to try and understand what that cohort looks like for that grade level, that we're also kind of just taking a look at to see what is effective to help support that transition.
All right. Oh, my favorite subject, right? So I have just a couple of questions to better understand and see where we are. So when I looked at this, help me understand the correlations possibly from we see a lot of retention in kindergarten, some retention in first and second, right? And then we noticed this dip of third grade, and now we see it spike where we have no control over the retention because you're either going to pass or fail your ninth grade class. What did we do in between time with these children that it shows up in ninth grade where you can't control the EOG that says, or the course that says that you're going to pass the ninth grade ELA class, right? So my concern is what's happening between 3 and 8 to prevent the retention. And from my perspective, what I'm seeing, the work that I've done over 20 years, fighting these very things, we're missing some gaps here, and we're allowing students to keep being promoted, and then when they get to 8th to 9th grade, it's like, woo-hoo! There's nothing we really can do because you now have to produce a certain skill set that you were supposed to got K through 7 and K through 8 that you haven't gotten. And so then we want to be excited about graduation rates, but are we really graduating children with the type of child that we say we're graduating? And so I'm concerned, and this is not about pointing fingers, and in no means that's not my intent. This is about, let's look at this data, disaggregate this data, and look at where we are and what's happening in between those grades that teachers control, that we believe we're trying to put the right supports that we can for remediation for students, but we're still missing the mark because when they get to 9th grade, they still can't produce. And so my thing is just to raise an awareness of what we're looking at, since we're looking at the data shares with us. In kindergarten, we saw the problem. They weren't quite there. Why? Because they're coming into kindergarten not prepared. And so you have teachers trying to do the work, and I'm sorry, parents, you have teachers trying to do the work of parents from 0 to 5 and act like wizards and musicians, and they are not able to help children catch up from 0 to 5 of what was supposed to take place, that they're trying to catch up from K to 3 when the testing starts. And so I will forever continue to embrace early literacy, which you hear me talk about, 2 sandboxes, early childhood literacy and wellness. All of that correlates 0 to 5, determines what we look like in 8th and 9th grade. These babies are constantly playing catch up. So what do we do, or how do we create the drop in non-promotion rates by helping parents be the first teacher to help their own kids? And unfortunately for us as WAKE, if we want to see these numbers change, I've tracked these numbers for 20 years. They have not changed so far as where we're looking at. And even if we go back with slides, even with the other slides that I saw right behind it when we deal with subgroups, right, within race. And so the question is, how do we support families to teach them before they get to kindergarten with full responsibility? I'm very strong about that. I stand on that. Kindergarten numbers this high with retention rates has to do with what happened 0 to 5. And we need to figure out how do we engage our parents in a different way to prepare them. And it seems to be kind of our responsibility as WAKE, if we want to see our numbers change and help alleviate stress from our teachers, to deal with public pre-kindergarten, to get them here and work on some things with that. I've done some parts of it, but I would love to see us as a board collectively with building on some steps that I've done intragovernmental-wise to help us with that. Because these numbers, kindergarten, that's a parent thing. And I'm sorry, I mean, I can take whatever comes, I can stand on it, I has data to prove it. But parents, I think, want to see their kids succeed, and I think that we have to show them what the culture of teaching looks like so they can actually help their children be successful. These letters that come home about their child retaining in kindergarten, that's hurtful. They care, but we've got to show them how to help their children. And please, staff, correct me if I'm saying something that's not in context correctly, but we have to do something. What can we do as a board to shift that awareness-wise? You know, we can't add the money to it, but we can really make it a huge thing around awareness. We got whole community engagement departments. How do we utilize and be innovative and creative about being aware of what we need to do so parents can know to decrease these numbers? Thank you for your patience with me.
Thank you. I just had a brief question. When we're defining non-promotion, does non-promotion include only the students that remain in the district but do not go to the next grade, or does it also include students that leave the district, maybe dropping out or for some other reason do not matriculate up to the next grade?
It crosses district lines. The state is able to tabulate it so that if a child leaves here and goes to Myers Park High School in Charlotte and has to repeat 9th grade, they will be counted as a non-promoted student. But if they leave us to, say, go to a private school or Tennessee or somewhere else, usually that, we can't confirm where they are. The way that mechanically it works is they look at all your kids at the end of 1 year. Some of them graduate, and who's left over, mostly K-11, right? They roll forward, and they try and find them after the 20th day of the following year. And wherever they are and however they're classified, if their grade level is the same as it was and they're still in a North Carolina public school, then they're a non-promoted student. So there's a few that probably leak out, but not many.
So let me ask a different way. Are students that drop out included in the non-promotion statistics?
Yes.
Okay. So by the time you get to high school, you might be losing students that are not just retained, right? but they're out of high school at that point.
Yes, that can happen, and we know that being retained is often a precursor for dropping out, because a lot of times before a kid will drop out of high school, they will have a failure experience as a ninth grader, maybe come back in the fall as a ninth grader again, maybe finish out that year as a ninth grader, and maybe that's it. So they're often commingled there.
All right, thank you. Thank you.
Chair, point of information. BOG and EOG, the data, do we have data for the percentage of BOG versus the EOG for third graders, the beginning of grade assessments versus their end of grade testing? Do we have the split between it? I know that we have it here as.
I can give you a ballpark number. It's usually around 38 to 40% for the BOG, and then the EOG is closer to 60 for any given year.
Okay. Thank you.
And of course, some kids will pass both.
Do we want them to, so that they can get through their presentation and then we go through the second round of questions at the end? Or is this pertaining to?
It's the same.
Okay, go ahead, Ms. Cole.
And I'm sorry, because this is just a big stickler for me. When we speak about the transitioning, and I understand what Ms. Rice was saying about how we see the higher numbers in kindergarten, first and second grade, and that's where they're retaining a lot of their base, right, and how they're going to proceed. But then when we get to 9th, 10th, 11th, and 12th, this is like the final 4 years that we get them to make sure that they have the skills that they need. And I know that we're focused on our graduation rates, but even if you look at the bar that's on page number 7, although it's dropping from the 10% and going down below 5%, we're still at a spot all 4 years where we're seeing too many kids that are falling through the cracks. And if we're saying we're giving them credit recovery, I'm just concerned about the success of the credit recovery being a reactive thing versus proactive, because they're getting to the point where they're getting these results. And then we give them credit recovery, which is a chance just to say, okay, do these things, and then you could move on and stay with your peers. But there was a reason why they had that, and they're not getting any additional instruction. They're focusing on the things that they didn't get right. And I'm saying this from speaking to teachers, personal experience, and parents, and they're all experiencing the same thing. So I don't like the fact that we're dependent on saying we have a program that's credit recovery to catch our kids up if it's not following with putting them in a proactive place. Does that make sense? Like, then we wouldn't see them continue in 10th, 11th, and 12th grade. They would be able to catch up if it was just strictly the transition from 8th to 9th grade. By the end of 9th grade, they should be prepared to go on. And I don't see that much of a difference to save those kids, so to speak, for lack of a better way to put it, from having all the information they're supposed to have, that they would organically be promoted with all the classes and all the material they need to go. So I just struggle with that, because I think it's more reactive than it is proactive. And that's the whole point, is to get the kids the knowledge, not proceed.
Yeah, and my hope is, because this is the 23-24 data that you'll see in the far right bar, my hope is over the last 2 years that we've instituted objective recovery as well. And so, and I'll get into that a little bit later as well in the next presentation of our objective versus credit recovery, and I have some numbers and percentages for you, which have increased drastically over the last year.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
So as you heard my, Siobhan Stone, good afternoon, everyone. As you heard my esteemed colleagues say, retention is usually a precursor to dropout. So we have to take it very seriously when we make those decisions. And because of that, we do share guidance with all Wake County principals annually prior to the end of the first semester to support them in the decision-making process, because it's not a decision that we take lightly. Last school year, the guidance was updated to make sure that when those decisions are made for children, that it's looking at all data sources. Also, our guidance includes considerations and alternatives to retention, because we know it has an impact on children, and it also has a low effect size. We also ask principals to utilize all data sources, make sure they check the potential outcomes of that retention, think about key questions to consider, and we also offer a timeline. So these are required processes and best practices related to our applicable district policies. And when that decision is being made, we usually ask for, even though the principal retains the authority to promote and retain the authority, that that's a decision that is made collaboratively with the school-based team, including counselors, social workers, teachers, sometimes even the parents, right? How will this impact my child? And so, again, that guidance is shared every single year and was updated last school year to help them in the decision-making process. And I'll turn it over to Brian.
Good afternoon. Sorry for my tardiness to the table earlier. So as was alluded to earlier, so high school is a little bit different when it comes to the promotion and retention. So we're going to have that more of a credit-based, credit-bearing promotion and retention. As you can see here on the information on the slide, it is going to vary based off of your grade level in whichever you're currently sitting in. So for example, within ninth grade, you do have to pass English 1 and 2 credits in areas either math, science, or social studies, and some additional, 3 additional elective-based credits as well. So that's a total of 6 credits. So as we progress and as we are promoted through, we have to add on to that each time. Where it differs a little bit is going to be within your alternative-based schools. They do have a different credit level, and that is because of the pathway that they are on. It's going to be a possible accelerated pathway to that 22 credits that is required, instead of offering the gamut of 8 credits within a year.
When we look at our timeline for promotion and retention, never should it be a surprise to any family that their child is struggling throughout the year. It should be a constant conversation, a progress monitoring of how that child's progress is throughout the entire academic year. We have guidance to come out the December-January timeframe in which we give those promotion and retention criteria to our schools so that they can have that as guidance as they're working through that process. Mid-quarter, when we look at the third quarter, there should be a parent conference, a contact with them, and the possibility of retention in that letter should be mailed out and given to those families mid of the third grading period quarter. Then as we look at progress monitoring and review of how that child's making that progress in that fourth quarter, and then we know a school-based committee will make that decision and recommendation in the last quarter of that academic year. For all of our students, especially 80%, we want to make sure that they're thriving with core instruction. What is it about our core instruction, our high-yield strategies, our best instructional practices? What are they doing to ensure that 80% of our students are, in fact, thriving through core? When core is not meeting the needs of our academic needs of our students, then we move more into that supplemental support. And then if that is still not where it needs to be, we look into a more prescriptive, intensive support. But the goal is our core instruction should be so tight that 80% of our students are thriving within that core. And you'll see how we are overlapping academic as well as student wellness, and how the school culture climate gives supports for our students in thriving with their academic progress. We have our foundation with our learning model, with See Me, Challenge Me, Engage Me, and Know Me. And these are not just words that we want to have on posters to be educational display, but we want to make sure that we are, in fact, looking through these 4 lenses as we're trying to give that proactive support for all of our students as we're looking at the lens of what needs do they have as they go throughout their academic careers. Dr. Ladin-Giles, if you would bring us home and talk about those interventions and targeted supports.
A couple of questions came up today as it related to the transition and how are we supporting students from 8th grade going into high school. We mentioned earlier the availability of credit recovery. We will talk a little bit about objective recovery and how the state is aligned to that work. We'll go a little bit deeper into our next presentation. But please note that when we're identifying our 20% of our students, it's important that not only our core instruction is aligned to the needs of our students, but we have to identify with that 20% what else is needed. And so we provide intensive as well as supplemental supports that are tailored to the needs of the kids. How do we know it's tailored to the needs of the kids? We do that through looking at the data. We look at it, and when we're saying data can be, of course, we look at the numbers a lot, but we also have to identify the main source, which are student work samples. And so through those types of pieces, we're able to truly provide targeted supports for all students. That means students with disabilities, our students that have limited English proficiency, and then we have opportunities for students to have extended opportunities for learning as well as tutoring supports.
Any additional questions?
Yes, Dr. Johnson, can you expand on the promotion retention criteria in regards to the English learners or limited proficiency? How do you apply those criteria?
So with our English, our students that have limited English proficiencies, we have to look at a little bit more data there. And so they are assessed using the access testing. And so that model tells us where they are on the scale, right? From there, we are able to identify additional supports, whether that's push in to the classroom supports, whether that's being immersive in terms of English like other English students. And so it just kind of tells us where do they need the support. And so the access testing, along with being able to monitor students from an observation standpoint, tells us what do we need to do in real time that meets the needs of the kids.
And how early can you make that decision in the academic year?
Well, we have I say a testing calendar, a window that we get access testing. Normally, I'm going to get this wrong, but I believe that it's within at least the first 20 days of school.
Or within the first X
Or within
days
the
of a
fir-
child enrolled in
Yes.
school. So it
There
depends
you
on
go.
when they enroll.
Yeah, just want to make sure that we capture that need earlier rather than later.
Yes, sir.
Thank you.
Dr. Job, and we'll just go around.
I want to go back to literacy for a minute, because I think when I was a high school teacher, what we saw is that we had students who came in with very limited literacy skills, who just barely got over that third grade hump, but then didn't progress, and it started to focus on reading to learn instead of learning to read, and they kept falling further and further behind. What are we doing to check in on literacy schools in like grades 5, grade 7, to make sure they don't get to 9th grade with extremely low literacy?
So we have individual reading plans that are put into place for students. We utilize our M+ data. We look at multiple progress monitoring pieces, how they're doing on their classroom assessments in kindergarten. How are they doing on those letterland assessments? Right? We're looking at their foundational literacy skills, and then if they do need additional supports, we are creating intervention plans for them. Typically in kindergarten, it doesn't happen until second semester though, because some of our students are entering school without the school-ready behavior and exposure. You don't want to quickly, you just want to give them time to be exposed. And so we usually develop intervention plans. Or it could be if a classroom teacher is seeing that the majority of her students don't have the requisite skills to be successful, that she's simply adjusting core instruction. It doesn't mean that all of the students in the classroom need an intervention plan. I need to adjust.
Right, but what's the equivalent of M-Class for like a 7th grader to check in on their literacy abilities?
So we have, we have the STAR reading assessment, and my colleague here can speak to that.
Yes, I didn't want to interrupt you. So we do have our STAR reading and math assessments where we have screeners for those students. And so they will give us an output of what domains the students are not progressing well in, and PLCs and teachers can utilize that to tailor intervention plans, MTSS plans for tiered support as well. Also, we see within the secondary level, you're right, where we are saying we're making you try to be a master of content instead of teaching you how to learn. Whereas our learning model, our student-centered focus learning model has just high-yield strategies of where we're trying to teach students how to learn the content, not just delivering the content. So that is more of a rollout of that has transpired this year as well.
And Dr. Joe, if I may also add, the state was very progressive when they took on having all of our K-5 teachers to go through the science of reading. And so therefore, with that professional development, we have continued those aspects. And there is a model for those students who are in secondary level in order to have some of those key components if they're still struggling with some of those literacy skills. But the science of reading with that foundation is something that we still employ.
Ms. Rice, did you want to ask a question?
Oh, I didn't have a question, I just had a comment, which is, thank you so much for this data-driven presentation. I think when I first came on the board, Dr. McMillan, I talked about that. I believe that every decision that we make is supposed to be data-driven. And sharing presentations like this to show where our data is takes a snapshot, and that you guys have been, to me, very transparent about where we are so that we know where to go as a board and what we can do better to help all students and things that, so mine was just really a statement of saying thank you and kudos to sharing this raw data that's real and giving us better understanding of where we need to go. And hopefully at some point we can look at that disaggregated data a little bit more and talk about our Black students who continue to be at this high retention rate and how we're going to support them and create strategies targeted specifically for them, because why that's data driven. It's nothing else. It's not about race or specific, but it's data driven within these subgroups to show that population of children are struggling, are hurting, and we want to make sure that parents really know what to do for their students. And then we also have to look at historical factors of why Black students are constantly lower performing, regardless that they have the right to read at this point. There are historical factors that put some of these things in place, even as early as how old our own parents might be. So I just appreciate this work that you all did and the way you put your graphs together and everything to really, you told a story here and you told a story to help children, and I appreciate that.
So you mentioned that you were going to speak more about the credit and objective recovery. Is that, because what I see in the next thing is the summer, is that where we're going with more? Okay, just wanted to ask before we move on.
Yes, ma'am, because I believe last year when we presented on the summer school, you asked the question of what are we doing to prevent, and so we wanted to make sure that we had what we have done up until January of 2026 with objective recovery, so you had accurate information.
Okay, and if I can just ask one question. This is great that we have this information and we're able to see it in chart format, because it really kind of helps us where we need to zone in. When we do get that updated information, can you share that with us so that we know?
And Dr. Hill, I just had one question and maybe request. So in the world of education, we know that there's a big difference between proficient and growth. And I think if we saw the data on the growth, especially in regard to Ms. Caulfield and Ms. Rice's question around what are we doing proactively between grades K and 8, I think that would be important information for us to kind of look at and see, while we may be seeing growth in students, what else are we doing to make sure that we are seeing a less of an incline on retention in high school? Thank you.
I just had a thought. I'm wondering, how much have we looked at the actual structure and preparation of students entering into high school from middle school? Because the actual structure of the school day is very different than middle school. The executive skills that students need in high school is very different than what they need at the middle school level. And then when you start throwing in like A and B days and different calendars on some schools, longer classes, I'd just be curious what the impact of that can be on so many of our learners, and that maybe one strategy could be to address students' preparations in ninth grade or at the end of 8th grade from making that transition. I don't know what y'all think.
And, Mr. Hagerty, I have not done my research in Wake, but I know that at some high schools, they have mentor ambassador programs. And so therefore, that can be an area that we explore to see what we have here. If those upperclassmen are assigned to a ninth grader to kind of help them navigate through, help give them study skills. But I haven't had the time yet to look at that, but we'll make sure that we explore that. But I know that that has been, according to research, a very valuable program in which a mentor-mentee relationship is developed to help them with that very drastic transition. And we can bring some information back on that as well.
And Chair Hagan, I think that's the idea, that we bring that back because we are doing those things, and I think it would be important at some venue we get an opportunity to share that. But that is literally what all districts do in terms of trying to have a transition program for those students going from middle to high school.
Just to add to what Mr. Haggerty was saying, we don't see on slide 7 such a drastic change between 5th and 6th grade, which is also very different and very challenging. And I'm just going to give a shout out to Ms. Townsley in Heritage Elementary School, because she's just an example I'm thinking of in my head, where she focused on transitioning the kids and getting them ready for middle school, because it is very different, especially for somebody that young and, immature and not really understanding what's coming next. She got rid of the anxiety, she talked them through things, and she did just sample practices of what you're going to do. And it really made a huge difference by the time they got to 6th grade. And I think, we're not seeing a drastic difference between 5th and 6th grade. So it's worth seeing what is it that they're doing there. Are we doing the same thing in 8th and 9th that we're doing in 5th and 6th to prepare the students?
And I think Ms. Rice had a follow-up.
Yeah, and it's to piggyback on your conversation around growth and proficient. It's something that's important to me. I know we're talking about student retention, but one of the things I think that gets left out of the light a lot are our students who are already proficient, right? I think they are sometimes forgotten, in the process of trying to help our students who need remediation. Our students who are proficient, where are we seeing their growth? Right? They deserve the same opportunities as our children that we focus on with remediation. And so my question would be, too, if you would come back information around if ever a time to present our students who are proficient, what does their growth look like? Because they can be proficient, but what growth did they have? What opportunities did they have to ask level 4 questions? And making sure that that's actually integrated versus when we're doing our pull-ins or pull-outs, they just get what they get and they're just good at what they do, so they get it right and they're proficient. But where are their growth opportunities for them to shine as well? So I think that's valuable. I had a kid that I had both spectrums, right? Kids with both, that he came into kindergarten already mid-year kindergarten on in-class assessment. So what do you do with kids like that who did the 0 to 5 work, right? And they're there. I think we have a lot of our children who are outside the numbers that we see. It means we have quite a few kids who are passing, who are doing good. But what are their opportunities for growth, and not just allowing them to be mediocre students, but to really shine in excellence?
Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Hill. We look forward to getting more information.
Thank you, Ms. Gordon. Thank you. Thank you, Dr. McMillan. So we want to transition now. Ms. Cooper, can you pull up the other presentation? As we're looking at our summer learning opportunities. And Dr. Lang-Jones, if you want to bring us up to speed while we have 2 presentations in Simply about that.
So we have to make a correction around slide 23. And slide 23 offers an opportunity for us to go a little bit more detailed in terms of our remediation plan and what the re-administration of the testing looks like. And so we wanted to make sure that we just didn't give a big, broad timeline for when that happened. And we wanted to make sure that you understood that the timeline for our testing window for elementary schools are the last 10 days of their calendar. And then for high school, it would be the last 5 days of their calendar. And so you'll see on slide 23 a slight change there.
Thank you, Dr. We want to welcome Ms. Honeycutt, who's going to tell us about the wonderful things that CTE is helping us assist with our summer learning opportunities. And we're going to go ahead now and begin with our desired outcomes.
So our focus today is to recap what happened in 2025 in terms of our summer learning program. We're going to look a little bit at that data, and then we're going to say, what are we bringing into this year in terms of 2026, what those initiatives are, and then our goals. And then, as I just spoke, we're talking about the remediation plan as well as the re-administering plan for kids in terms of testing. As always, we're aligned to the strategic plan in terms of priority 1 and 2, focusing specifically on student knowledge and skills as well as student dispositions and well-being. And then now we're going to go ahead and get started as a recap of our summer learning 2025. In elementary, we hosted 2 different programs, our Read to Achieve Camp, which served only grades 2 and 3, and then our Power Scholars, and I would like to lift up that we do have our partners here with us today from the Y. Thank you, Y. And so they will be here to ask questions as well as give us some more insight into things that we may not speak on. And then for secondary, we want to talk about Career Accelerator with Dr. Honeycutt, and then our, of course, high school credit recovery, which we'll talk about credit recovery as well as objective recovery. And then lastly, we have our expert in terms of what that looks like in terms of the administration of reassessing for students towards the end. So we'll start with elementary, and we will hear from Dr. Stone.
All right. So this slide presents a high-level overview of our Summer Read to Achieve Camp. North Carolina legislation requires 72 hours of reading instruction, and in summer 2025, there were 63 host sites which served over 2,500 students. On the right-hand side, you will find the attendance data for our program. And you will notice 4,314 students total were invited, and then you'll see by calendar the number of students that committed, who said they were coming, and then the number of students who actually attended. As part of our Read to Achieve Camp, we conduct walkthroughs to assess the quality of instruction, engagement, and checks for understanding. This information is then used to make real-time adjustments and to inform future camp programming. What you will see is in terms of learning targets aligned to level 1 of our learning model, and 65% of the classrooms, we saw that there were visible posted learning targets for the students. We also saw in 38% of the classrooms that the learning targets were unpacked with the students. As it relates to engagement, in 85% of the classrooms, we saw that students were engaged into student-to-student discourse. And then checks for understanding, which aligns with levels 1 and 2, we observed in 97% of the classrooms the teachers utilizing checks for understanding to provide immediate, specific, and targeted feedback to students around the foundational literacy skills that they were missing. I would be remiss if I did not mention that today at 10:50 a.m., we were notified that the Read to Achieve Summer Camp for Wake County was selected to be a semifinalist for the 2026 Summer Learning Award due to the level of quality with our program. And so a huge shout out to our district coordinating teacher, Julia Alamo, who largely spearheads this camp for our district in collaboration with Essential Partners. Next, at the end of camp, we also deploy feedback surveys to students, families, and camp staff. As you can see, around 90% of families agreed that attending camp was beneficial for their child. 89% considered camp effective at supporting reading and literacy growth, and 92% would recommend camp to another family. 76, or more of the students thought camp helped them become a better reader, and they felt the teacher helped them feel comfortable every day and thought camp was fun. Lastly, 84% of camp staff felt camp was beneficial to the students. The end of camp test is the end of year in-class assessment. Some of the students that met end of year proficiency, I think there was a question earlier about the kids who are already proficient. We don't ever rescind invitations. So some of the students who met at end of year still have an opportunity to attend Read to Achieve camp. On the left side of the slide, we have attendance outcomes by grade and number of days. Okay? On the center and right side of the screen, we have end of camp testing outcomes. Of the third grade students tested, 43% met the 725 Lexile requirement for a good cause exemption. However, some of those students had met the goal at end of year and still came to camp. So again, we pulled the students that met the 725 Lexile for the first time and found that 19% of third graders met the expectation after camp. The extra 12 days of instruction was enough for some students to reach proficiency and encourage growth with other students. On average, all students grew 4.3 composite points pre to post camp. Both grades grew at least an average of 4 composite points, but second grade slightly outperformed third grade. Lastly, there were some questions last year from the board as to why parents were declining camp, so we've requested that information from the parents last summer. Other responses received, the reasons were provided as follows. You can see the large majority of parents said, I'm going to be on vacation during that time, I can't come during that 12 days. Another group of parents said, my child be attending another camp. We had 11% of parents who had another reason, and I'll share some of those. And then we had some parents that said, I will provide the skills or the remediation that my child needs. And then 5.7% of our parents moved out of the district over the summer. So when we looked at the other responses, these were some of the reasons. I'm attending another camp for educational opportunity. Some parents felt their child no longer needed camp. Some faced logistical barriers like scheduling, distance, some noted care, and some desired more flexible, engaging programming. And roughly 1/3 of our parents provided no specific reason for that particular data point. So moving on to our Power Scholars program with our YMCA partners. 2 of our campsites, students were served through the Power Scholars program. This is a joint venture between YMCA and Wake County Public Schools. Instead of the typical 12 days of Read to Achieve camp focused solely on reading, Power Scholars is a 5-week program that adds additional components such as enrichment and math. So the children, even the scholars, take field trips each week. Unlike the Read to Achieve camp, Power Scholars serves kindergarten through 5th grade students. The invitation requirements for 2nd and 3rd grade remain the same since those 2 grade levels are part of the Read to Achieve camp. They are also required to meet the legislative requirement of at least 72 hours of literacy instruction for those 2 grade levels. Of the 330 total students invited to Power Scholars, 70% attended. You will see their literacy and math gains at the end of camp for at least 1.5 months. We've had very positive feedback from the staff, caregivers, and students, and we are expanding that program this school year. And I'll turn it over to my colleague.
Yes, thank you. So the high school option that we had for summer for 2025 was our Credit Recovery Summer School. So within Credit Recovery Summer School, we have 20 days to recover credits, and it not only just one, but multiple credits for those who may need multiple credits. And it may vary based off of the schedule and or your calendar as to when you started out over June and or July. And so wanted to share a few different data points with you. So that is the amount of students that you can see across our grade spans 9 through 12 who engaged with us with Credit Recovery Summer School. And what we also would like you to show is we have 3 different options this past year. So this was the first year that we offered on-site, blended, and virtual options for our students. We felt that we needed to be able to reach more students and give them more options, and by doing this, we were able to do so. And so we have the number of courses taken for our on-site, blended, and virtual laid out in our online platform right there for you. And we have over 2,400 students that were enrolled into our credit recovery summer school with over 3,600 courses taken with a pass rate of 76% completion rate. That is a big deal when we think about the amount of time they're investing in there and getting those credits and getting back on track and on cohort, as we were discussing earlier. So we were able to, again, recover those courses. And the reason why, again, you see a varying number between the students enrolled and courses taken, you have students that are taking multiple courses at a time in order to recover that credit. So what we also wanted to talk about is the objective recovery, as you were asking about earlier. And so when we think about what are we doing to prevent them from having to go to summer school in these summer sessions. So we have two different logins. It's all under the same platform, but two different logins that our students utilize right now here in Wake County Schools. So we have objective recovery and credit recovery. Your objective recovery is that real time, I'm in the class right now, I didn't do well on a unit and or standard, and the teacher's going to send me this unit or standard, and they're going to reinforce it, reteach it with me, and then I'm able to retake it for an actual grade. And that is that real-time objective recovery. Credit recovery is where we've already failed the course, and we are now taking again to recover the credit. We do have legislation that indicates that we have to offer these options and also offer grades for this. Where credit recovery used to be pass-fail, now credit recovery is an average and grade with your original grade, and so it is shown on the transcript as a grade instead of a pass or a fail as well, just so you're aware of that. As we look at the numbers this is going to be just from August to January of 2026. We didn't go past that timeline for you just because we still have students that were engaged in courses right now and haven't finalized them, but we can share what the end of the year looks like with you as well. So right now we have over 5,600 students that have participated in objective recovery, 23,000 active enrollments. And so those are enrollments into particular objectives. And we have over 18,000 objectives that were successfully recovered. So when we think about that, we have over 18,000 objectives that a student didn't perform well on, did not achieve mastery on that objective. And the teacher is indicating we need to remediate, we need to reassess that objective, and so you can show and demonstrate mastery, and then go back and get credit for that within your grade as well. So that is some of that prevention that we're talking about, and making sure, one, that we don't just lose the student with mastery. They got to master the content, right? They have to be exposed to it, and we're doing that at multiple times. So that's the completion rate for objective recovery. As of right now, with the credit recovery, we have a little over 2,200 students that have participated in credit recovery, and we have those current active enrollments right there. Those are students that may be off cohort and or, again, receiving multiple credits. And the completion rate may be a little deceiving there because you're seeing a 50% completion rate, but we may have students that are enrolled in 2 classes right now that are completing the first one before they go into the second one. So it may show, that may be off a little bit when we get to the end of the year. We'll have a more accurate indicator of what our completion rate is for credit recovery. So that is kind of where we're standing with our current ways of interjecting before they fail.
So the next 2 slides highlight the career and technical education programs that we offered in summer 2025. These will be familiar to some of you board members. The first one is Career Accelerator. We do this in partnership with Wake Ed Partnership. We had about 234 students who completed all aspects of the program in the summer. Just as a reminder, students attend workshops in buildings where they're developing those soft skills or workplace skills, durable skills, whatever the buzzword is this week. And they also have off-site experiences where they are attending immersions at industries. No surprise to anyone around the table, I'm sure, students report the immersions as the highlight of the experience. They love being off campus. And we do end that program with a career and college expo where students get to see, because they're not able to see all the immersions, a lot of those partners come back on the last day. They are able to visit with them there. We started these programs with the goal of students being able to see and be exposed to things that they maybe had not seen before. And consistently, the survey data with students and families is positive in that direction, that they are able to see careers they hadn't considered and to connect with adults that might help them further down that pathway to the career. The second program that we offered in the summer is our District C program. We've partnered with District C for many years, both in school year implementation and also in summer implementation. About 300 students participated in the program. This is a little bit different from Accelerator because in District C, the industry partners come to teams of students that are from different schools, and they pose a problem to the student, an authentic problem that the business is having, and the students work together in the District C framework to come up with solutions that they pitch back to the business partner. It's a really unique thing to see. I'm going to be very proud of some of the ideas that our students have. One of our metrics for success in here is what the business partners say about our students, and you can see over 90% of them say that they would be likely to consider our students for internships or job placements after teamship. So again, another really great growth opportunity for our students.
So an additional item that we offered last summer as well was our EOG and EOC remediation and re-administration opportunity. So DPI provides us with the voluntary opportunity for students to retake the EOG and EOC and be remediated in items that they did not perform well on the assessment. Now these are for students who are passing their grade or passing their subject, but did not perform well on the EOG and or EOC. And so when we're thinking about that on a point scale, 1 to 5 with EOC, EOG, we're thinking of students who scored a 1 or a 2 but still passed their course. And so we had almost 9,000 tests taken and 2,268 that had additional proficiency after they had the opportunity to remediate and reassess. So that's 26% of those students actually grew to a level 3 or higher within that administration of that assessment. It is important to note that biology was not included in that because it was a new test last year. But again, these are students who were able to remediate and reassess and be counted towards proficiency.
In addition to all of the programs mentioned, there was also ESY, which is extended school year, offered, knowing that this was for students that were in pre-K all the way up to 12th grade. 200 students were served at the host sites starting in July. And I want to make sure that we note that in terms of the host sites, 92 of those students were served off-site, either at home or in the community. Students had an opportunity not just to be paired with their teachers and IAs, but they had services rendered by speech therapists, occupational therapists, as well as our physical therapists during this time. Note that transportation was provided, as well as breakfast and lunch at the host sites.
Now to 2026 for the preview.
Okay. This year, we are continuing a lot of the programs. Power Scholars, to name a few, that's been extended. Read to Achieve, which again serves grades 2 through 3. And then for our secondary, we're going to have our expanded view of credit recovery. That's also credit recovery and objective recovery. And then in addition to that, we will still offer the administration of the EOG, EOCs through remediation as well.
For the 2026 Read to Achieve Camp, much of the system structures and curriculum are remaining the same with a few upgrades to increase efficiency and foster a greater experience for our students and our families. And this was based on that walkthrough data and the feedback from our parents and our teachers. So based on some of the teacher feedback on how to improve their planning, rotations, and instruction, we are purchasing additional rotational materials as well as more text. We did also gain 2 new multi-track year-round schools this year, but we were able to combine more of our traditional and single-track year-round schools, which will hopefully positively impact transportation costs. We also were able, because teachers had expressed they didn't have enough time to plan on the front end, we are not able to give them an additional teacher workday before starting camp to be able to meet the diverse needs of all the learners that they'll be receiving for those 12 days. And then we also ensuring that we just have a high-quality staff as well. We will continue to provide transportation and meals, and instruction will be certified teachers in whole group and small group formats, providing differentiated literacy instruction, emphasizing the science of reading. And here you'll see we're continuing with Power Scholars we've added for this school year as well. But again, we are very excited to have the YMCA as partners and being able to expand the program this year at Fox Road, Riverbend, Zebulon, Knightdale, Wakeline, and Wendell Elementary Schools.
And so, as indicated, we will be offering credit recovery high school again as well for our 9 to 12 students. So depending on the calendar, it's going to be dependent upon once we start. So students will have the opportunity to recover multiple credits if needed during that time. We will still be offering the 3 different versions of it. You're going to have your on-site, your blended, and your virtual options as well for those students. It'll be offered to all of those high school students, and all high schools will be offering it. We will, at the end of the school year too, the last 5 to 6 days following the end of the school year, we will still have the option as well to have some objective recoveries for those that are really close to passing, that may need 1 or 2 objectives to remediate and have objective recovery as well, also to prevent last minute failure if they are close to passing. Also, is this the updated one? Okay, I just wanted to make sure it's the updated one. I have a printout just in case it was not. So with the EOG and EOC, remediation and re-administration as well, this will be the updated version of that for us here in Wake County. It will also be for students who are not proficient, but may retest during that testing window. So all schools will participate. Students must opt in to retest, but all schools will actually participate in this, whereas previously it was optional for some of our schools. The higher score will replace the original score for the assessments, which could possibly assist with our grading and our accountability, and that does include grade 3 reading and for read to achieve. It will be the last 5 to 10 days, depending on the grade level span, as Dr. White-Jowers indicated earlier. And the information for this was shared with principals back in February by Data and Accountability and Research.
As shared earlier, we will continue the ESY program. The dates for the ESY program are a little bit different than what we said earlier in terms of the last days of testing. This starts July 7th and it ends July 24th. There'll be 14 days of on-site or site-based instruction where home and community services are rendered based on the IEP. And then during that time, we know that transportation as well as breakfast and lunch will be provided for those students as well. There will be 5 host sites for the 2026 summer. Know that instruction is going to be given by certified special ed teachers, and that the services are customized to meet each of the students' needs based on that IEP. Also, services may include, which we talked about earlier, speech services, OT services, as well as physical therapy services.
So as we look at our next steps, we have the categories of where we're looking at recruitment for our staff and our students that are going to be eligible. How we're looking at the communication efforts for enrollment, the transportation and compensation that goes into the planning of this, the progress monitoring that will have to be a component, and then making sure that we update you on the progress of these programs and the desired outcomes. Do we have any questions?
We will start with Mr. Hershey.
Thank you for the presentation. How is all of this funded?
So for the Read to Achieve camps, it's funded with state funds, PRC 85 and PRC 16 are those 2 funds that supports our summer reading camps.
And those are very
Literacy.
specific. It
Yes.
tells you what you can and cannot, and they're specifically for literacy.
Yes.
Grades 2 and 3. Yes, sir.
Great question.
Within the high school, you have a 12-month employee that is kind of your coordinator for your credit recovery summer school, but you're also able to employ teachers of record to be there through recovery dollars as well.
That covers all aspects of this, because I saw meals provided and transportation and everything.
For secondary, is no transportation and/or meals provided.
And then for many summer programs, to be a part of the summer feeding program, they will make those at the sites as well.
For the Read to Achieve program, do we have data that follows the kids through the year to see how they perform after going through the program rather than just what happens at the end of the program?
Pass that into fifth grade.
Yes.
What does that look like? 'Cause I'm just looking at so the 19% and the 17% of the students meeting the benchmarks, like, as much as the parents seem to be seeing progress and stuff, those numbers don't seem like super high. So I'm just wondering if there's other data backing up, like using this particular curriculum and this.
I think we could look at obtaining some data to where we have tracked to see if the students progress over the years. Report that back out.
Hi, I'm for special education. We just wanted to share the ESY extended school year debt paid out of the special education general fund. So it's not the same because it's not a governmental program. Great point.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for the presentation, and I've had the chance to visit with the Read to Achieve, and it was a marvelous program, and it also just kind of lifts up the spirits of a lot of the kids that otherwise felt like they kind of, defeated in some ways of not being able to perform up to par. So having that concentrated time and having the more attention provides them that lift up the spirits, and it was very just it lifted up my spirits to see that. But I do like to see kind of those data for subsequent years after they've gone through that program. That would be great. And in terms of the Ms. Honeycutt, the CTE and how long is that program for the summer?
So we pay for those programs with ESSER dollars, with COVID dollars, which is why we're not offering them again. That funding has been depleted. Sunset, that's a good word. So the programs were 5 days. The accelerator was 5 days, and the District C program was 7 or 8 days, but they only came half a day. We did that because the students had a better grasp of the framework if they had exposure over more days compared to being more consolidated. We tried it several ways over the course of the offerings, and the Career Accelerator, 5 to 7 days seemed to work well as also.
Yeah, my question was going to ask, how can we recruit more businesses to be involved and even to take on some the financial part of it to bring those kids into those careers and find other options for some of those students. I think that's a good thing to maybe investigate some partnerships with industries out there.
And I think Wicked Partnership has worked really hard to do that, to think about how they could take the program and have another version of it, certainly not to the scale that we were able to do with the COVID dollars, but to think about a program that would be, maybe not serve as many, but would still be as as beneficial. One of the benefits we had was we were able to pay the students a stipend for participating in the CTE programs, and that allowed a lot of them to participate because they didn't have the pressure of a summer job in particular. And so when you think about those dollars kind of expanded out, it is a lot to ask business partners to commit to and do. So it has been a little bit of a challenge, but we always look for business partners to come alongside and create experiences for students, whether summer or during the school year.
Thank you. That's it.
Any other board members have questions?
You had mentioned the attendance in several of these programs. And it looks like about 60% of them that were invited were able to come for one reason or another. So I know some of these programs have changed a little bit. Are we keeping track of the data and the success of the student? And I think it kind of goes along with what Dr. Jobe said, but I'm wondering, like the CTE sounds wonderful, but now you're saying that it's not available anymore? So now we have a program that was doing really great, people want to attend and we don't have it, but these other programs where it is absolutely necessary for literacy for them to go through, are we year to year showing the success, or is it going to be too hard because we've shifted the program? Because we had the ingenuity, we had credit recovery, we had something else before that, I think it was.
Before that, you had grappling.
Right. So we weren't really, we were giving them pass or fail, we weren't really tracking it to see how successful it was going. Do we have any way to keep that data?
It depends on the program, because some of the programs that we have, we will retain that data. If you switch to something new, it may not necessarily be comparable, but I think you can share about what data each program will have that we can. This will vary based on the program.
So something that the high school level can track is once we have recovered credits and we have a student that's back on cohort, you can track whether or not they stay on cohort throughout their high school career. So that's one way that you can track that. Also tracking the completion rate of courses and the engagement of certain courses. And so when we're looking at, and Mr. Robinson's back here, she does a lot of our data pools for us. She'll look at how students are engaging with courses, and we will reach out to schools and say, hey, they haven't logged into this course in 2 weeks, what is going on? And so we have recovery leads at the site that do a really good job of touching base with those students. And so we can look at the interaction rate is what we would call it with the courses, completion rate, and then how they stay on cohort after they've gotten those credits recovered as well. And a lot of times we can recover during credit, a summer school credit, to where they actually can graduate, a summer graduate for our seniors.
Okay.
So there's all ways we can do that for high school.
And the other piece I'll lastly have to kind of share some feedback on is we even think about summer programs like Read to Achieve. And so we recognize that there can be multiple data points that we have to track, meaning that both you and I are teachers in the program and we use the same curriculum, but your students are much more successful than I am. Is it because of something that I'm not doing? Is it because I have higher need students? Are you a better teacher, or is it something that we can apply to the curriculum? And so, there might be the multiple data points. So if there's any information or data you want to share about programs that have those multiple data points.
And that's kind of what I meant, because it's also us learning how our children are learning better, right? So if we're switching programs, it's making it harder for us to kind of track where our successes are and where we need to kind of, pinpoint a little bit more focus. So but what you said is perfect, that we're following it up. Did have one other question that I lost my track of thought. Okay.
I think Dr. Ng has another question.
Yeah, speaking about Read to Achieve, and I have an idea what the answer would be, but what would prevent us from having a separate date to have another, because one of the think reason that they couldn't make it is because they went on a summer vacation, or whatever. So is there a possibility of having another date? And I know the answer probably, but yeah, I mean, that would be, great to have an option for our families if they can't make it to one day to have another day.
Unfortunately, it would be budget, because that means that we would have to hire probably the same amount of teachers, thinking about transportation. Unfortunately, transportation is probably one of our, I would say, weightiest categories in terms of what we have to pay out. Yes, sir.
And I did want to add, when the campus plan is already planned for the various calendars, so there are different dates already for traditional calendar, our modified schools, multi-track year-round, single-track year-round, but transportation is one of our largest expenses, that is salaries. And I did want to also share, as, a follow-up to the funding question, with the Power Scholars Program, we pay for the facilities, so the use of the school, we pay for the meals, and we pay for transportation, but the Y actually pays for the salaries and all the field trips that the scholars take.
Ms. Caulfield?
Yes, sorry, I remembered my other question. On the previous presentation, you had mentioned that in the third quarter is when we reach out to the parents. So I had just noted down, because I wanted to see if we were going to address it here, but obviously that's not in high school because we have 2 semesters in high school. How do we address it in high school? And also with having the amount of students that we're seeing need the program, regardless of how many attend, the amount that we're inviting, is there something that we could do before the third quarter, reaching out to the parents? And if you could kind of tell us what we're doing with that.
In high school, it still is a thing within third quarter, because if you take 2 semesters, 4 courses, if I fail 2 or more courses within the first semester, then I'm going to be an at-risk student according to promotion and retention rates. And so we would still look in the third quarter at those data pools and still need to notify that that possibility of not being promoted to the next grade level as well. So it wouldn't necessarily be it'd be a number of courses that would quantify that. It wouldn't just be, hey, you're not going to go to 5th grade. You need to pass this course and this course in order to be promoted from 9th to 10th grade. So it still happens, just a little bit different way of verbalizing it.
Okay.
But we just want to make sure that parents are informed all year long, and it's not just a surprise at the third quarter. But we have put in measures to make sure that they have ample information and how we're trying to address what gaps and what skills and competencies still need to be mastered by their students.
Right. And I think the point is really more the proactive piece,
Yes, ma'am.
because if we're waiting till, okay, now you're at risk, you've already failed classes, and now you're at the point where you might not even move on because you've failed too much. And that does a lot to the students as well. That really, and then it not only does it, they lose their motivation, it just affects them going forward in so many different aspects. So that's why I'm just really mostly stuck on this proactive piece, so that they don't get there.
And we've had a lot of positive feedback from schools that are really widely implementing objective recovery. The students, when they recover that, their positivity rate and then their engagement rate is often higher because they don't feel like they're so far behind.
Right.
And so being that proactive measure is probably really, really important for not only the grade itself, but for the confidence of that student.
Right. Well, I'm glad we're doing that, and I hope it continues. Super. Thanks.
So I do have a couple of questions. I remember us having this conversation last year about like their Week to Achieve camp and all of the summer learning that we were doing. But I remember my question from last year was, how are we duplicating this in other ways like after-school programs? We know that after-school programs is not only helping, our working families, but also children there have been a lot of data around the gains that we see around after-school programs. So I think that's one of my questions. I know that there's funding and budget stuff tied to that question. I do recognize that, but I guess, have we explored this? What innovative approaches have we perhaps researched or thinking about taking to where we can duplicate the Read to Achieve camp in the summer to kind of give that support year-round. In talking about the data that we were just presented with around retention and promotion around those elementary grades, I think that's where my mindset is going. And then two, to piggyback off of what Dr. Joe alluded to around, while we are seeing gains in the Read to Achieve, time that we have these kids, how is that being supported? Like, we're seeing gains there in those 12 days, but then what does that translate into for the remainder of the year, or their, as they matriculate through elementary school? Heavy questions, I know. I try to put all my questions in my way.
Ms. Gordon, I know that we do have some after-school programs, but the concept of what measure of tutorial or prescriptive learning that is in there, that's something I will need to investigate and bring it back so we can look at that piece. And then also, I know that those gains in which students are making during Read to Achieve, that folder of that progress follows them and becomes part of their transition when they go back in that academic year. So we can make sure that they see, that incoming teacher can see what progress they have made and then how that learning can continue to be prescriptive for them to keep that momentum going. But we can definitely explore this a little bit more in this area to bring back an update for you.
Okay, and then my other question was around the actual curriculum that's utilized during Read to Achieve. I know I have a lot of educator friends who have actually been a part of the Read to Achieve camps. And I do know that it is extremely scripted. So I guess how are we carrying over that curriculum into day-to-day core instruction? And is there any flexibility or autonomy for educators who are involved in the Read to Achieve camp? Like, do they have any flexibility or autonomy to lean on just good teaching skills?
So we utilize the EL Solid Start Skills curriculum, and that is a curriculum that teachers are expected to use during camp particularly for their small group instruction. But there are other rotations, and Dr. Denisha Smith, because she serves as our district contact for Read to Achieve as well. There are other rotations during the summer program. I think they may have some autonomy.
So teachers do have some autonomy, especially those, our Read to Achieve teachers are teachers who are in the regular classroom. So some of them do pull in regular resources from the school year that we provide through CMAP. And they do have that autonomy. We provide the Solid Start curriculum so that it can be consistent across the district. But yes, the teachers do have that autonomy, and their leads can provide them with that support as well. But there are opportunities for them to supplement the materials that we provide.
And the other rotations.
I actually have a follow-up to your question just now. So Read to Achieve is state mandated. So does the state board or DPI, do they, if not in full, do they partially dictate or do they dictate the curriculum that you have to use?
No.
Okay.
Districts are left, they can choose. Districts can choose which curriculum that they use.
No, but they mandate the standards that.
Sure. And of course, alignment with the science of reading.
Yes.
Right.
Yes.
All right. Well, thank you, Dr. Hill and team. Thank you. Appreciate it. I believe.
Sorry for so many questions.
Yes.